Coming up next on Tech News Weekly, it's me, Jason Howell, my co-host Mikah Sargent, and an awesome show, if I do say so myself. Rene Ritchie joins us at the top to debunk some Apple myths. You want to hear those. Also, Mishaal Rahman from Esper.io breaks down why a Redditor's Android device wasn't able to place a 911 call when it really needed to. Pretty important. Me and Mikah, we actually discuss why groping in the metaverse is actually something to take pretty seriously. And Kevin Purdy from iFixIt shares some of the most interesting teardowns of the year. All that and more coming up next on Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love
from people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 213, recorded Thursday, December 16th, 2021. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by userway.org. Userway ensures your website is accessible, ADA compliant, and helps your business avoid accessibility-related lawsuits. It's the perfect way to showcase your brand's commitment to millions of people with disabilities. It's not only the right thing to do, it's also the law. So go to userway.org/twit for 30% off Userway's AI-powered accessibility solution.
And by Udacity. Udacity offers online education that is geared toward people looking to take their tech knowledge to the next level. Get the in-demand tech skills you need to advance your career. Visit udacity.com/twit to learn more.
And by Andela. Andela is a global talent network connecting innovative companies like yours with quality technical talent, so you have more time to focus on your core business. Visit andela.com/for-companies to schedule a complimentary consultation and receive a 2-week no-risk trial with their vetted technical talent.
Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly. This is the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent.
And I'm the other guy, Jason Howell, and I'm getting excited. We're getting close to the holiday. We've got like all these really great articles. You know, people are doing such amazing pieces right now, like the year in review, you know, all different facets of technology. And we're going to talk about a few of those today.
Yes, that's kind of a fun way to lead into this because, look, throughout the year, people talk. That's what they do, and they have conversations online, and they find trends, and they find different things that they sort of agree upon, and then sometimes those things may or may not be true, but they sort of gain a life of their own, if you will. And today, I'm excited to be bringing on to the show Rene Ritchie from youtube.com/Rene Ritchie to talk to us about Apple myths that have gathered over the years. Welcome back to the show, Rene.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. I always love being here.
Well, we are happy to have you here and happy to talk about this. So obviously, you as a YouTuber have put together an incredible video that walks through all of these myths that you are talking about. And everybody should go watch the video. You know, we'll have the links and everything for you to go and see. But I thought we'd talk about a few of them from your video that we could go through and then go from there. The first one, I'm glad that you made it first in your list because time and time again, and especially as those of us, many of you who are tuning in to Tech News Weekly, probably at least a little bit techie. So maybe among your family, you're the people that get asked these questions. So when it comes time for everybody to gather together for the holidays and your Uncle Jim Bob says, I know this Instagram app is listening to me because just yesterday I was talking about Circus Peanuts and now I got an ad for Circus Peanuts in my Instagram feed. What do we say to Uncle Jim Bob about his Circus Peanuts and Instagram listening to him actively, Rene?
Yeah, that one is so interesting because people believe it. Like it's managed to sustain for multiple years, even though there's been several investigations into it, and no one has ever found any evidence to support this. And that's compelling because Facebook and Instagram, they get caught doing so many things. Like they've been caught spying on what apps you use, so they knew to buy Instagram or WhatsApp or try to clone Snapchat stories. They've been caught using background APIs to stay in the background longer, like the audio API. But with this, it would just involve, well, first it would turn the microphone on and you'd get a little indicator, but it would destroy your battery life, and you'd see the data spikes, and all those little white hat hackers would just light up being able to find this kind of stuff. So it's more that they are so good at behavioral modeling. And I even experienced this once. I went to another town to visit my sister, and we'd only ever texted about it. And I was started to getting immediately Instagram ads for a restaurant in that town. And I was thinking, are they reading my text? Like, how would they know this? But it turned out that for 4 out of the last 5 years, I'd gone to visit her the same week in the same place, and they knew my location data. So they just took a shot that I was going to be there again that week. And that's the kind of thing that happens. They are so good at building these profiles off of what we do in their apps, the apps that have their SDK, and they actually buy credit card information from data brokers to compare to our real world activities. So they don't even need to do this. They just know everything about us anyway.
Yes, I see. That's what I think is important. One of the places, so I do a pretty good job of locking myself down online, but one of the places where I have very clearly seen the sharing between services is through the use of Instacart. Love Instacart. It helps me shop without having to go into the store, but I order things on Instacart, and it's not long after that I will see ads for those things in other places. Some of the groceries that I purchase, or some of the brands of groceries that I purchase, I'll see ads for them popping up in other places. And so it's very clear that that's being, watched. And I think one of the big ones that people don't necessarily realize, because they're thinking about the deals they're getting, are those grocery store cards. Yeah. Because there are some grocery stores where the difference in price between using that club card or not using that club card is kind of ridiculous. And so you really do get tracked. Your behaviors get tracked. Those brands get tracked. And then they can combine that information and use it all to help you. And yeah, I think it's hard to sort of put together in your minds to conceptualize that all of this stuff can come together and understand you and track you across things. And I think one that it took me a long time to realize even was that kind of shared Wi-Fi connection, that if my partner, who may not have as much of a locked down phone, and I are both browsing similarly, and we're using that same IP address that the ISP has assigned us, that then accessing it from in other places could potentially serve those ads in other places. So, yeah.
Yeah, people get that with like yoga. I never expressed an interest in yoga. No, but you visited your friend Melanie, and she's huge on yoga, and we figured we'd give it a shot.
Exactly. All right, this next one, I mean, there have been a number of articles about this. I think I can remember a New York Times piece, if I'm not mistaken. There have been sort of looks into this, and this is one that I still occasionally hear some of my siblings joke about around the time that a new iPhone comes out. Rene, does Apple slow down iPhones when new iPhones ship so that we are encouraged to update?
So, I mean, yes and no. This one is harder to explain because it's really nuanced. When you get a new phone, and you install a new version of the operating system, it reindexes everything. It rebuilds all the libraries. So for like a day or two, everything does slow down because it's so busy re-downloading your photos or re-indexing your music collection. And that causes a spike in search results. Because iOS is updated all around the world all at once, you see a huge spike in like iPhone slow every September, where like for Android updates or Windows updates, those are spread around throughout the entire year. So you don't get those sorts of spikes. But also, as time goes by, Apple devices last a long time, and they do software updates for like 5 years now. But over time, those processors are older and older, the batteries are older and older, and the newer software is more and more demanding. So it is harder for those devices to run that software, and it feels slower, especially if like a friend of yours gets the latest phone with the latest processor and a fresh battery. So They do get slower after time, and there's also like bit rot, and there's also the other directory that always balloons up over time. So there are things that happen, but it's not malicious. It's sort of like you get like a fuel tank at the beginning of your phone, and you spend it over time. And doing a fresh install or getting a fresh battery can bring it right back to life again. It's just I think there's not a lot of awareness around it.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's constant explainer, but I do my best. Looks like we've got time for just one more. And I think at this point, sometimes this is just a method of finding comfort in a world full of confusion, at times sadness, and lots of chaos. But if we're not using it as a coping mechanism, if we're using it because we think it's doing something, tell us about force quitting apps. What is the lowdown on force quitting apps on iOS? And does it save battery?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one too. I think because some people just like things to be clean. So their idea is like, I only want to have one thing running, and it's cathartic to just make it rain apps when you throw them out of that card-like interface. But what iOS does, iOS works really differently than a traditional operating system. Like on the Mac and on Windows, things will page out, like they'll swap to disk if there's memory pressure. That means if you start running out of RAM, they'll just save the contents to the disk and then read them back off if you go back to them. iOS has no real concept of that. It keeps everything in memory. And then what it does is suspend applications, but leaves them in that memory. And when it has pressure, it asks all the apps to, release as much memory as it can. But if it still needs more memory, especially if you launch like the camera app or a social networking app or a cross-compiled game, something that's really memory hungry, it's going to jettison. The technical name is Jetsam, but people just call it jettison. The older apps, the ones you haven't used in a longer period of time, the more RAM you have, the longer it'll keep those in memory. Tabs in Safari, the same thing, but it's managing all that. And if you force quit the apps, it's not going to be able to just unsuspend them. It's not going to be able to just make them start working again. It's going to have to relaunch them. And that's a much more intensive, much more battery draining, much more CPU cycle intensive operation. So you're actually using slightly more battery and more compute cycles if you force it to relaunch apps all the time.
That makes sense. Yes. I am not an app force quitter, but I do know some people close to me who are, but they are well aware of the battery situation and just choose to do it for the sake of feeling like they're cleaning the slate. Rene Ritchie, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Of course, people need to go check out this YouTube video to see the rest of the things debunked, including talking about viruses on the Mac. All very interesting stuff. And of course, gorgeous video per usual. Of course, you can go to youtube.com/Rene Ritchie to find you. Is there anywhere else that folks can go to find your work?
Yeah. Absolutely. Right here on TWiT, MacBreak Weekly, every week with Leo, Andy, and Alex. It's the best time. Just the best time ever.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rene. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mikah. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Rene. And I agree. It's the best show on the network, right behind TNW. Right behind TNW. It's like so close, though. Thank you, Rene. Coming up, when 911 doesn't actually call 911, you know you've got a problem, and apparently Android has a problem. We're going to talk about that. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by userway.org, and I love what Userway is doing because Userway is all about giving everyone access to the web, right? The way it should be. Userway is amazing. Their vision is one that we really connect with here on the show. We talk about accessibility a lot on this network and on this show. Every website, without exception, needs to be accessible. It's a public entity, and it's also the right thing to do, right? Userway has an incredible AI-powered solution. It tirelessly enforces the hundreds of WCAG guidelines, and all you really need is a single line of JavaScript. It's super easy, and with that, Userway can achieve more than an entire team of developers. So you might be putting it off because you're like, oh man, that is a wormhole I'm not ready to jump down. And it turns out it's not that complicated. That's what Userway is here for. Making your website accessible can be overwhelming, but Userway's solutions make it simple, they make it easy, they make it cost effective. They actually have a free scanning tool so you can see if your website is ADA compliant. And that could kick you off. That could get you started to knowing what you need to do. UserWay's AI and machine learning solutions power accessibility for more than 1 million websites. You know, Coca-Cola, Disney, eBay, FedEx, those little guys, just to name a few. Many other leading brands, of course. Now UserWay is making its best-in-class enterprise-level accessibility tools available to small and medium-sized businesses, potentially like yours. Operating an accessible and compliant website isn't only the right thing to do, but it also makes business sense, especially when you consider like millions of people out there would require what UserWay does for your site just to be able to purchase your products. So make your products available to everyone. You're going to sell more that way. And when you need to scale, you need UserWay. For years, UserWay has been on the cutting edge. They've been creating innovative accessibility technologies that really do push the envelope of what's possible with AI, with machine learning, computer vision. UserWay's AI automatically fixes violations at the code level. It's doing this in real time, dynamically, and it does a number of things. It auto-generates image alts, so it's writing image descriptions for you. It recognizes what's in an image and then writes the description so that people who can't see the images well or at all still know what's there. It remediates complex nav menus, which can be an Achilles heel for companies. UserWay ensures that all pop-ups are accessible. It fixes vague link violations, fixes any broken links. Also ensures that your website makes use of accessible colors. You might be thinking, well, don't change the colors. Those are my brand colors. Well, it actually remains true to your brand in the process. Really cool process there. And UserWay gives you a detailed report of all the violations that were fixed on your website. UserWay is platform agnostic as well. So whether you're using WordPress, Shopify, or Wix, maybe maybe you're using AEM, Sitecore, SharePoint, all of them, you can easily add UserWay and integrate seamlessly with it all. Let UserWay help your business meet its compliance goals and improve the experience for your users. And it's not just us saying you need to use UserWay. A very familiar voice, the voice of Siri, has something to say about it as well.
Hi, I'm Susan Bennett, the original voice of Siri. You won't hear me say something like this too often. I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're looking for. But every day, that's what the internet is like for millions of people with disabilities. UserWay fixes all of that with just one line of code.
Man, that music's so funky. UserWay can make any website fully accessible and ADA compliant. With UserWay, everyone who visits your site can browse seamlessly and customize it to fit their needs. It's also a perfect way to showcase your brand's commitment to millions of people with disabilities. Go to userway.org/twit. You'll get 30% off UserWay's AI-powered accessibility solution. UserWay, making the internet accessible for everyone. That's what it's all about. Visit userway.org/twit today, and we thank UserWay for their support. All right, so we rely on our smartphones for so many things. Everything, sometimes it seems. One of those things happens to be the ability to call emergency services when you really need them. And we kind of, I don't know, maybe we take it for granted, but I kind of expect that my phone will actually do that in the case of an emergency, right? It's one of the benefits of always having it in my pocket. Well, it turns out it doesn't always work like that, and that could be a huge problem. It could be a life-endangering problem. Mishaal Rahman from Esper.io actually wrote an extensive piece on Medium about this scenario, the story that we're going to talk about here, and joins us now. Welcome back to the show, Mishaal.
It's great to be back, Jason. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Always great to get you on. I love picking your brain on this stuff because when I read through the Medium post, I will fully admit there's a lot of detail in there that kind of flies over my head. That's why I'm like, okay, we got to get Mishaal on here to talk about it because you understand this stuff so well and you really break it down. It's like you dissect it like CSI. So explain what happened exactly. There was a Redditor that posted about this, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, a situation. Maybe set the stage for that a little bit.
Right. So a few weeks ago, one Redditor went to the Google Pixel subreddit and posted their story of how they tried to call 911 to get their grandmother emergency medical services because the person thought her grandmother was having a stroke. And of course, that's a serious problem that needs immediate medical attention. However, when they tried to place a call to 911 through their Google Pixel 3 on Verizon, they quickly found out that the call wasn't being led through, that it was just getting hung, it was getting stuck, nothing was happening. Fortunately, they had access to a landline, so they were able to get medical attention for their grandmother immediately, but that was still a very frightening experience for not only that user, but many thousands of users who agreed and upvoted that post to become the top post ever on that subreddit. And that story got a lot of attention from all over the place because, of course, it's one of the things you expect your phone to always do, no matter what. Your phone should always be able to call 911, no matter like how much battery life it has left, no matter what settings you have. But for some reason, this user's calls did not go through. So people were wondering, will that also be true for my phone?
Yeah, I mean, if it doesn't happen for one, you have to ask yourself that, right? Like you said, and like I said, we kind of take this for granted. Thankfully, they had access to a landline, but I mean, I think about our house, and we don't have a landline. And I think we're not alone. There are a lot of houses that don't. So they were very fortunate to actually have that access to a landline and do something about it. What has been the response here? I know Google and Microsoft have both kind of, offered comments on this and made some changes. How are they changing things? And then we can kind of dive into, some of the detailed forensics, let's say, that you did on this. But how are they responding, first of all?
So Google actually responded about a week and a half after the post went viral, and they provided a lot of details that were actually quite illuminating about the nature of the bug. They revealed that the bug happens on a small number of devices that have the Microsoft Teams app installed, but when the user is not logged in. And they determined that the bug happens because of an unintended interaction between the Microsoft Teams app and the underlying Android operating system. So that alone gives us a lot of information about the nature of this bug, that an unprivileged application like Microsoft Teams is able to somehow interfere with emergency calling in the Android operating system tells us that there's probably some major bug in the OS itself that allows this to happen. Because an app like Microsoft Teams, which is not your dialer app, which normally doesn't really handle emergency calling for you, the fact that it's able to interfere with emergency calling suggests that there's something serious going on within Android itself. There's some bug that prevents this, that Microsoft Teams just happens to be triggering.
Yeah, no kidding. And, there are certain things on a smartphone that you just kind of, that I, have over the years have assumed are off limits for any app to have any sort of interaction with, or, potential of breaking or whatever. Dialing emergency services, you just kind of imagine that's one of those features that no one can touch. Even if you don't have a SIM card in your phone, usually your phone can still dial some sort of emergency service when needed. So these things are incredibly important. So, okay, so that's kind of like the basic rundown of the story and what's going on, kind of the response. I know Microsoft has pushed out an update to the Teams app, which supposedly fixes the problem with their app, but Google has an update coming somewhere down the line. Has Google said when and for what versions of Android this is impacting?
So this bug impacts Android versions 10 and later, so 10, 11, and 12 at the moment. And they announced that the update will begin rolling out in early January, so presumably with the January 22 Android security patch update. Any devices that are running Android 10 and later that receive the January 22 update should be patched against this bug.
Yeah, that's I guess I found that kind of interesting that it's still, for a bug that has the potential of being like, literally, it's not just like safety and security and protection of your data, but this has the potential of being a life endangering bug, that it wouldn't be like one of those emergency everyone, well, maybe it is behind the scene, an emergency everyone on board, trying to fix the problem. But it just seems strange that it would still be, a half month to 3 weeks later in order to roll out the update. Who knows? Maybe they'll do it sooner. But So you did, like I said, you did a lot of detailed forensics on this to really dive into it. I would say from the outside looking in, it's one of the things that I love about your writing, your specialty. You really go beyond just like, here's the story, and you get in there and figure out exactly why. You're looking at the system architecture, you're dissecting this, like I said, like CSI. What are some of the most striking things that you learned about why this happened, and I guess ultimately how to prevent that in the future going forward?
So I'll give you a little bit of a rundown on how we discovered this bug and how it works. So while we were, based on what Google said, we figured out that there must be some bug within Android itself, correct? So the first thing we did is we looked at the source code for the emergency calling services, which is contained within the telecom service. And one of the things we immediately noticed is that there was a recent patch fixing an overflow bug that could cause emergency calling to fail. And so we thought, hey, this was merged to the AOSP Garrett really recently, around the same time this Microsoft Teams bug was discovered. Could this be related? So then we worked backwards from there, figured out how Microsoft Teams could have triggered this bug. And what ends up happening is that the Teams app is unintentionally registering a instance of a class called phone account too many times. And this class is used by apps that want to place calls and have those calls integrated into the dialer. And so whenever Microsoft Teams is repeatedly creating instances of this class, it's filling up the list of accounts that are passed to the emergency calling code, because the emergency calling code is trying to sort the list and figure out which service will be the best one to place this emergency call through. And because there's like a whole bunch of Microsoft Teams services in that list, what ends up happening is that when it's sorting that list and it's comparing all these duplicate instances, there's a very small chance of an integer overflow or underflow happening because of a subtraction that they're doing when they're comparing these two instances. And whenever that bug happens, it leads to a cascading series of other issues down the pipeline of the telecom framework, and it just kills emergency calling before it can even happen. So it's a very, very, very niche set of bugs and just a very weird interaction that Microsoft Teams just happened to trigger. Like there was, I doubt anyone had any idea this would ever happen, but it just happened. And Microsoft Teams exposed this bug in Android. And then we worked backwards from the patch that fixes the bug and figured out, hey, this is what Microsoft Teams is doing. And we think this is why the bug is happening. And of course, we confirmed that our analysis is correct based on a code difference between the previous version of the Microsoft Teams app and the current version. They did fix the issue as we described it.
Wow. Okay. All right. So then, I think you, in essence, you've kind of addressed somewhat my next question, probably my final question here, which is like, are there other apps that could potentially run into this issue? It really sounds from what you're describing, it sounds like the Teams app was doing something very particular, very specific that, like you said, exposed the problem with Android. Obviously, Google's going to address this in January. Teams has been updated to remove the issue. So if people get the update on Teams, then it's not going to happen, at least with Teams. Very small likelihood that this is going to be something that is impacted or affected by another app on someone's device, but not impossible, I suppose. Would you agree?
Yeah, so the problem is with this bug, although Teams triggered it unintentionally, this is the kind of bug that could be replicated in another application by basically copying what Teams did. If they wanted to wreak havoc on a device, they could copy what Teams did and eventually trigger an emergency calling to fail on a device. And any devices that don't receive the January 22 update would be vulnerable to this kind of attack. But there are some mitigations that Google could do to scan the device for duplicate phone account instances and clear them as they're being made. So it's not an attack that could be hidden from apps like Google Play services if Google were to roll out some kind of detection service.
Okay. All right. Well, I suppose that's, positive. We don't have a whole lot more time before Google pushes out their update. But still, at the same time, kind of alarming to know that there is such a severe payload with something like this. And boy, you got to be a pretty horrible person if you decide to do this, intentionally in an app to wreak havoc on people's phones. So really cross my fingers that no one decides to go there. Mishaal Rahman, of course, Esper.io. Tell people where they can follow you online and what Esper's all about.
So you can follow me online at twitter.com/Mishaal Rahman. And if you go to Esper.io, that's the company that I work for now. We're a Android DevOps company. We build the software for, and we help manage the deployment of software on fleet devices such as restaurant kiosks. So if you're looking to build and manage a Android fleet, we're the place to go.
Right on. Love what you're doing, Mishaal, and congratulations on the move to Esper, by the way. You used to be at XDA, followed you for years there. But it's always great to get you on the show. Thank you for your time and your knowledge, and we'll talk with you soon. Happy holidays.
Thanks for having me on, Jason.
All right, take care.
Happy holidays. Up next, it didn't take long for the metaverse to develop a harassment problem, and honestly, none of us are surprised. We'll get to that in a moment, but first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Udacity. Udacity offers you an online education program that is geared toward people looking to take their tech knowledge to the next level. Udacity has specialized in exciting content that can help take you further in the career you want, and they offer the latest cutting-edge nanodegree programs you can't find anywhere else. Udacity is here to encourage your career growth. They want to provide you with information about the career you want, they want to give you the skills for that career, and then they want to help you get the job. Here's one of Udacity's success stories. Aaron said Udacity's nanodegree programs and Career Resource Center played an integral part in helping them land a job offer from Google. If you're looking to get into the most cutting-edge technology careers, you can get nanodegree programs in AI, flying car and autonomous flight engineer, intro to self-driving cars, machine learning engineer, robotics software engineer, and more. Udacity's courses are created with partners and industry leaders in Microsoft and Google, IBM, AWS, and more. The best part is that they select team leads at top companies to be the instructors. You are going to get the right knowledge from the experts who are working in that field every day. When signing up for a nanodegree program with Udacity, you can expect courses to be project-based with active learning that lets you test your knowledge, homework and projects that will be reviewed by qualified professionals, real human feedback and reviews with access to mentors 24/7, and flexible schedules where you choose what works for you, whether it's 5 to 10 hours a week. It's at your own pace, and you can graduate in as little as 3 months. 110, Blacks in Technology, and Udacity have teamed up to offer part-time online tech scholarships for Black Americans who don't have a 4-year degree. They're offering 2,000 full scholarships for qualified applicants. You can apply today at udacity.com. Scroll to the bottom of the webpage and select scholarships under resources. You can also upskill your entire workforce with Udacity. You can check out the enterprise section of Udacity's website today to learn more. Get the in-demand tech skills you need to advance your career. Visit udacity.com/twit to learn more. That's udacity.com/twit. Thanks so much to Udacity for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. Jason Howell, what is your story of the week?
Oh, I wish this wasn't my story of the week. It's kind of a hard topic to talk about, but VR, I'm a fan of VR. You are too, Mikah. We both have the Oculus Quest, so we've spent enough time in virtual worlds to kind of understand the potential, the possibility of this story that we're going to talk about here. And actually, it's a really great article. If you go to MIT Technology Review, you can see Tanya Basu wrote about the metaverse and how, as the headline says, it has a groping problem already. And I mean, there's a sense of embodiment that is attached to residing in a virtual world or the metaverse or whatever the heck you want to call it. And it's a sense of embodiment that goes beyond, like when you send an email, there's little of your body attached to that email, right? I mean, there's the text body, I suppose, but that's not like, you couldn't interpret that email as being a part of you outside of your thoughts that you put into words. Same for DMing someone or conversing with someone online. Words can really hurt on social networks. Spoken word can hurt, when you're playing a live game with someone, but VR really takes the potential for abuse and the damage that's the result of that abuse to an entirely different level. And my opinion is that has to do with the embodiment aspects of playing in VR. And so to hear, to read that headline might sound silly to some, people like virtual groping, like what the heck is that? Like just take your goggle off or whatever the case may be, right? But the idea of virtual groping, it really is a virtual intrusion of your space inside of a virtual space, like the metaverse. It's real. It carries, it's kind of an extension of your perception of safety or the lack thereof. When you're in a VR world, your body is represented, right? When you're in a VR world, you're looking around, you've got your hands, you're connected. You look down, you might not see a representation of your body, but you perceive it as being there. So in essence, our bodies can get tricked into feeling or believing or perceiving things as being more real than they would be if you were playing a game on a big screen in your living room. And so Tanya Basu, that's all kind of set up for the fact that Tanya Basu wrote about sexual harassment and how that's taken place specifically in the context of the article inside of Meta's new Horizon Worlds, which actually you've spent time in Horizon Worlds. Mm-hmm. I have not spent much time or any time in there yet, but I've spent time in other virtual worlds. What is it? Oh gosh, why am I suddenly blanking? I always blank when I'm trying to remember this game. Well, anyways, it'll come to me. There are other VR worlds, and they are all very similar. You have the same sense of embodiment. But can you tell me a little bit about your experience in Horizon Worlds and how does that tie in?
Yeah, so Horizon Worlds is a place where you go to create your own world and then join other people in the worlds that they create or in the worlds that maybe are created by people from Meta. The important thing to understand, or the one thing that I wanted to note, is that it is now available to all adults in the US and Canada. So at the time that I was using it, it was in beta, but it is sort of, I think it's still in beta technically, but more people are able to use it. It's not invite only is where it is now. The way that it works is you are disembodied. Well, you have the top half of you, no legs,
right.
As you're used to in a lot of these apps, and you can go to someone else's world. You can create your own world where you are actually going in and making adjustments and building out structures. But the thing that I tried out whenever I first got there was joining kind of this meta-created world. There was sort of a waiting room and a place to it would highlight some of the other worlds that were around. It was around Halloween, and so there were some options to go portal into some Halloween worlds. But the main space had different people all walking around, having conversations. There was somebody who was very clearly a VC having a conversation about investments over in the corner with somebody else. To my left was this person who was a little kid who was going around to everybody going, hi, hi, hi. And then I was standing there for a while playing a little paper airplane game where you tried to pass a paper airplane through these different hoops that were kind of floating above the whole scene. And a person from Facebook actually joined this space and started walking around and teaching everybody how to do some of the things that aren't immediately apparent, sort of surprises, little Easter eggs. And one is if you throw up both of your hands, then it will make confetti fly above you. And then there's a way to do to make hearts appear, like heart emojis appear. And so the person was teaching us how to do these different things. And then they also were there for support. So somebody was saying, hey, how do I do this? How do I walk around and actually feel the walking around? I can't do that. I have to do like the portal thing where you're in one spot and then you go to the other. Some people to actually
where you zap
see
over.
them. Yeah, zap over. I have to do zap because otherwise I get sick. And so the person did not want zap. They wanted to be able to move through the space. So the person was kind of walking them through that. And I have to tell you, given the amount of time that we've spent in a pandemic, kind of in our homes and everything, I was a little intimidated to start hearing all these people talking and to have conversations with them. And the other problem is that I have this issue. It's not really an issue, but it is also an issue that my username on every single thing is just my first name, my last name. That's just how I've always done it. And so in creating my account there, I just did the same thing. But then I was like, this feels like one of the places where it would be somewhat beneficial to have a name that's different. Not because I'm going to do anything bad, but just because I would like some layer of separation between me and me, as it were. Yeah. So you don't feel that so much whenever it's not in virtual space, but in this virtual space, I was really feeling it.
Yeah. Yeah, and in its own way. I mean, for anyone who's never, hopped into, and by the way, I remember the second I tossed to you, I remember the name. It's Rec Room. Rec Room is the virtual space that I'm very familiar with. But for anyone who's never experienced it firsthand, there really is a perception when you're in there, and especially as you get accustomed to it and get used to it, a perception of reality. I mean, it's called virtual reality, right? And it's easy for someone on the outside looking in to say, oh, well, all you ever have to do is just remove the helmet if you don't, remove the headset if whatever. But by that point, someone can really push themselves into your space, and even worse, Tanya talks about or writes about, when you're in a virtual world and someone intrudes on that space, persists in doing so, even when you try to fend them off, they might push themselves into, simulating acts of true sexual assault. These things, and by the way, you never really know who's on the other side of the screen, right? That person who's being assaulted in this virtual world could have an actual real world history in that regard. And something like that could easily re-traumatize. Like it runs the gamut as far as like the dangers of something like this. But, there's this like legacy thought or belief by, horrible people online that like, because it's this layer of virtualness or disconnected from real reality, that I can say and be and do whatever I want to you, and it doesn't matter because it's not real or whatever. And I thought this article did a really good job of illustrating, like, well, wait a minute, back up, redefine what you're calling real, because when you are in these worlds, it may not be that someone is touching your skin in a real world sense, but that intrusion, that space intrusion, that some of the gestures that simulate sexual harassment and groping and that sort of stuff, that can actually impact you on a psychological level, because it impacts how your body perceives and your nervous system responds and all of these things. And this is not the first time that we've heard of it. In this case, it was a beta tester who reported being groped by a stranger inside of the world. Meta, of course, said, Horizon Worlds has a feature. It's called Safe Zone. And that person just needed to activate it. And then that would put a protective bubble around the player. No one could talk, touch, or interact with them. But what that ultimately does is that puts the onus on the person who's being assaulted.
Yeah,
instead of creating a system.
That. Yeah, it's called victim blaming, and it's not cool at all whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, like, my thought when I was reading through this is like, why not make protective measures the default? Why can't that be the default? If I sign up for a new service, and I'm not saying that you can never take those protective measures off. I'm saying start with the protective measures on. Mm-hmm. Maybe you have a tiered system where in the beginning you're very protected, and then as you go along, you have the ability to tear away the layers a little bit as you feel more comfortable, as you understand the measures like Safe Zone that you have the ability to activate, because I think it's important to have those features. But why default to everything is allowed, and then let the horrible people do things to you before you learn to make a change on how you behave to protect yourself. Make it the default and start everyone there. And then if you really choose, if you say, hey, I feel comfortable removing these protective layers and just going in and seeing what happens, great. That's a choice that you actively made. I don't know. That was my thought from this article.
I agree. I 100% agree. That's exactly how it should be. And I was disappointed that it wasn't that way. That's just the way that it should be. Plain and simple.
So I think there's going to be a lot of development around this. I mean, I think, unfortunately, sadly, I think this is an issue that is not going away, that it's only going to persist and grow before the people running these networks really understand, okay, wait a minute, maybe we do need, because I mean, look at social media, right? How long have we been dealing with issues on social media? And they're only now putting in some of these measures that we've been asking for years, literally years. So why it takes so long to protect people, I have no idea, but there are methods, there are ways to do it. And I hope that they do it sooner rather than later.
Agreed.
All right. That was fun. Not really. But anyways, let's take a break, take a breather. And then when we come back, actually, we've got a really cool breakdown of iFixIt's most interesting and intriguing teardowns of the year. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Andela. It's a global talent network, has a mission to connect brilliance with opportunity. Your company is expected to move faster than ever before to stay ahead of the competition, right? Well, with so many priorities to manage, how exactly are you supposed to find time to build and onboard an amazing engineering team that's going to help get you where you need to go? Well, that's where Andela can help. Andela is the world's first talent network connecting innovative companies like yours with top-tier vetted engineers, so you have the time to focus on your core business. Now, you might be asking, why Andela? Well, Andela is committed to your success. They have a combination of expert technical recruiters, proprietary matching algorithms. They connect you with developers who are the best in the business, and that enables you to accelerate your productivity, drive your revenue, of course, and scale your business. They offer rigorous vetting, so their hiring process is quick, it's efficient. It also maintains the highest quality admission standards to make sure they can place you with the top quality engineers at scale. And you've got global talent literally right at your fingertips. Today's hyper-competitive hiring environment requires companies to have that, right? Companies that are limiting themselves to local hires, you're at a super, disadvantage here if that's what you're doing. You're limiting yourself to a much smaller pool. And with Andela, you can tap into their pool of highly qualified talent from around the world and cut your hiring timelines down from months to days. And Andela understands that companies are expected to do more with less and consistently justify their ROI. So when you hire Andela engineers, you can expect that they're going to be efficiently onboarded. Onboarding sometimes can take a while, right? Well, it's going to be super efficient. They're going to be ready to deliver value for your team within days. And Andela engineers are not just part-time support. They're fully embedded into your organization. They've got at least 5 hours of overlapping working hours with the rest of the engineering team. So you've got that connection. Mindshare partnered with Andela to quickly hire 10 new digital experts, including data scientists, machine learning specialists, analysts, and software developers. The executive director and head of business intelligence at Mindshare says, as we continue to enhance the Synapse platform, time to value is very important. Andela is a good partner in helping us identify the right talent that is fit for different purposes. So tap into a wider talent pool. That's what it's all about. Stop competing with major tech companies and spend less time interviewing. Brilliance is evenly distributed, but opportunity isn't. Visit andela.com/4-companies, and you can schedule a complimentary consultation and receive a 2-week no-risk trial with their vetted technical talent. That's Andela, Andela, andela.com/4-companies. And we thank Andela for their support of Tech News Weekly.
You know what's super cool? When you come across a story and you go, that there is going to be my story of the week. And then it turns out that not only does it get to be your story of the week, but you also get to talk to someone about this very story. Joining us today is iFixIt's Kevin Purdy to talk about the most interesting teardown finds of 2021. Welcome back to the show, Kevin.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We are pleased to get you here. And this article, it's actually a video first, an article. You should go watch the video, go read the article by Michael Degnan. And you can correct me on that if I've mispronounced. But this piece kind of looks at some of the interesting finds that took place this year. And as we're wrapping up the year, this is a perfect time to talk about some of the different discoveries that you folks made. So I would love if you could kind of give us an overview of kind of for anyone who hasn't really heard of iFixIt, which I think many of the people who are listeners will at least know the name. What does iFixIt do before we kind of dig into these teardown finds?
Yeah, sure. We want to help everybody fix everything. So toward that end, we offer free repair guides, step-by-step photos, how to get inside your device, how to fix things. And sometimes they're written by us. Most times they're written by the community, wiki style. And along with that, we also sell tools and parts that you might need to, get those things done. The dirty little business of commerce. But mainly we're just super interested in repair and fixing things. And so toward that end, we take things apart as soon as we can get our hands on them, and that so we can show you, hey, here's what it was like to get inside. Here's what we found inside. Here's some interesting new stuff in here, and then also, of course, later down the road, we can then make a repair guide out of that process and others.
Yeah, absolutely. This is iFixIt is a tool in my toolkit for sure, along with supplying tools in my toolkit, and fixed so many devices, including I remember the day that I got this. It was a Christmas gift. I'd been asking for it every single year, or not every single year, but every single day. Please let this be in my. It was the Kindle keyboard. And so I still have my Kindle keyboard because it is near and dear to my heart. And it is only because of iFixIt that I am able to keep it running because for some reason those batteries in the Kindle keyboard just don't hold up for very long. So every once in a while it comes time to buy a new battery for it and replace that. And then also a Pebble smartwatch as well. I was so pumped whenever you folks got the batteries for those and we're able to.
Yeah. And that was one of my favorite articles I wrote a couple of years ago, was about the Pebble community that's keeping those running. The Rebel community. Cool. I'm sorry. REBBLE.
Yeah. I love that article.
Clever name. Yep. So let's talk now about kind of newer devices, as these were some of the teardowns that happened this year. Do we want to start at the top? Of course, we won't be able to cover all of them and wouldn't want to because we want folks to go and check out the great video and article that goes with it. But let's talk about the Z Flip 3 and what you folks discovered.
Yeah. So if you look at our video, I mean, the real top line is we put it in a water tank. And if you don't remember the original Z Fold, which we don't have time, but it was a media scandal, a device design debacle, and a groundbreaking new device, all three in one. But the main thing is that it was so fragile that just kind of looking at it and saying a bad word seemed to break the screen or cause the hinge to stop working. But Samsung claimed like, hey, we've got these waterproofed, and so I went to the pet store with Taylor and we bought an aquarium and we put them in water and they survived. Samsung did a lot of interesting things to make them more waterproof, make them more durable, and it worked. We did it and we dropped them and they survived. And I said interesting. That does not mean repairable. The main thing there was adhesive. They used a lot of interesting kind of glued together gaskets to keep water out, which is going to be a pain for people who try to fix them themselves. But just from a pure engineering science perspective, we were like, wow, man, they called us and we called them on it and they delivered, at least on the waterproofing side.
Yes. It's really interesting to kind of see the small components that were involved in that and the process that was involved in that. And so definitely worth checking that out, especially if you've got one of these devices to see what they've done there. And then
don't drop your phone in water for fun though. I just want to I really want to be clear that even though you can get them for like $600 on deals now, like don't drop them in water. Every device loses water resistance over time as glue breaks down, as seals get less and less secure. So, those are day one Z flips and Z folds going in that tank, just so you know.
This next one is certainly a gasp moment because it's not typical of Apple. But apparently there was a slight shift in the repairability of the MacBook this year. Is that the case?
Yeah, and it's part of an overall shift that Apple has taken this past year toward the pigs flying, record low temperatures in hell moment that we're seeing, where they are offering tools to individuals to fix their own devices. They say they're going to put out service guides. They backed down from a really nasty idea they had to disable Face ID for people who fix their own screens. And this is part of it. The MacBook Pro, the newest one that has the chunkier boy that has the ports that people actually want to use. What we found in there was pull tabs, which if you don't know, they're long strips of adhesive. They are super fun to pull. They make like a Looney Tunes sound as they come out of the device. And they're just, it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 tabs that you pull out instead of just a mass of glue that you have to soften with alcohol and butane and other things. One interesting thing here, and we haven't really written about this too much yet, is that while those pull tabs are in there and you can, seemingly so that human fingers can pull those batteries out, Apple's official service manual still says you can't replace a battery individually. You have to take the whole top case off and put the whole, replace it with the whole top of the MacBook again.
Interesting.
Yeah. So they're either at cross purposes or something else is going on. We'll see.
Huh. I now I've got another bit of nostalgia. I had a friend whose MacBook Pro, he thought it was done and gone. And I said, I don't know. I think it might just be the battery. It ended up being the battery. And so I ordered an iFixIt, repair kit and came in the mail. And I said, okay, you're going to have to be here all day because it's going to take me a while. This was a MacBook Pro with Retina display of yesteryear. And so the whole thing had to come out.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I remember putting on the gloves and, putting down that those chemicals that helped to remove the adhesive on the batteries. And I mean, everything had to basically come out of the device. So it's like, well, now's a good time. The whole thing can get cleaned out while we're in here and then put it all back together. And I mean, there's no way I could have done that without the excellent repair guides that were there. And the thing worked exceptionally well after all of that. And so, it ended up costing him far less than having to get a whole new computer whenever he didn't really need a whole new computer, just needed it to work as it did before.
Yeah. I mean, batteries for laptops are like, they remind me of how sometimes you're like, I feel terrible. I need to quit my job. My life is in shambles. And like, am I depressed or am I just hungry? Do I just need a snack? And sometimes when you replace the battery in a laptop, it's like, oh, you just needed a snack, huh, man? Like, oh, okay, you're doing much better now.
Oh, that's a really good comparison. Yeah, absolutely. The next one, and this is, I think, the one we'll end on here, was one that I have to admit, despite working in tech for quite a while, I had never heard of jelly scrolling. And so this was the year of jelly scrolling for me, where I learned about jelly scrolling and then learned about how the iPad mini I had maybe had jelly scrolling and what the heck is going on with jelly scrolling. Can you tell us what jelly scrolling is and what iFixIt discovered in its work?
I got to be honest with you, Taylor, who hosted that video and did some of the investigation, could probably explain it better than me. But if you look at how the new iPad Pro is the reason they're shifting to these mini LEDs that are discussed in the video is it allows the screen to dim wherever the image needs to be dimmer. That's the new hotness, the new technology they're moving toward is individually controlled lights throughout the screen. The old way is a backlight on one side of the device that basically floods the screen, the panel from one side with big lights. And so there's going to be some, differences in the screen where the big backlight is and the end of the screen is where there isn't any light projecting. So most iPads compensate for this by putting the lights on the narrow end. The shorter end, whatever the shorter from one side to the other end is. They have the backlights there instead of the longer run where you would notice the light change more. And then with an iPad mini, for reasons, I'm just going to put an asterisk there. For reasons, they actually put the backlights on the other side, the longer side, I believe, of the screen. And so what you're seeing when you're jelly scrolling is the very, very slight difference in refresh between one side of the screen and the other. And you would only really see it if you were, moving something dark through the screen. Is that about right, or am I completely wrong? You can let me know.
No. So yeah, this was a whole kind of education in screen refresh rates and how Yeah, absolutely. So the important thing is, when you looked at it, if you looked at it in just the right way and at just the right time and scrolling at just the right speed, you would see that jelly scrolling.
Yes. Okay.
So it ended up being one of those things where most people are not going to come across this, and it's not a big deal, but it is just a sort of all of the stuff coming together to make sort of a physics conundrum that's not solvable. So it's just kind of like, you have to deal with that.
Yeah. And so what we point out in that video is that, like, with both the iPad Pro, which has this new mini LED localized lighting, and with the iPad mini, which is, trying to drive the technology as far as possible, both of these displays are just amazingly complex. And so from a just universe perspective, you can sit back and be like, wow, these things have come a long way from just like, a screen that just like glass that holds a bunch of LEDs. But also from our perspective, more and more, it's important for us to see screens that are easier to remove and easier to take out without damaging them, because they are such an important part of the device. They're often the most expensive part of the device. We want to push and see these things easier to be replaced, because they're one of the first things to break, and they're also the most expensive part.
Mm-hmm. Folks, there are several more that you get to check out in this article and in the video. You should definitely go there, iFixIt.com. Kevin, Purdy, thank you for joining us. Of course, they can go to iFixIt.com to check out the great work of iFixIt. But is there a place folks can go to follow you online?
Sure. If you're not just into repair, but you're into weird things about bikes in Washington, D.C. and the Buffalo Bills, you can follow me at Kevin Purdy, Purdy on Twitter.
Sounds good. Thank you, Kevin. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Good to see you. Happy holidays. And thank you all for watching and listening. We've reached the end of this episode of Tech News Weekly. We publish this show every Thursday. All you have to do is go to twit.tv/TNW. You'll find all the ways to subscribe, audio and video. It's all there.
And we should mention that if you'd like to get all of our shows ad-free, you should check out Club Twit, because for $7 a month, you're going to get every single Twit show with no ads. It's kind of cool. You get your own little feed all to yourself. So you just go through, find the show that you want, and subscribe, and you are good to go. You also get access to the Twit Plus bonus feed that has content you won't find anywhere else. Could be behind the scenes, special content from the hosts, any number of things. And what I think is the coolest part, which is access to the members-only Discord server. If you're wondering what the heck a Discord server is, if you've ever used Microsoft Teams or Slack or one of those chat platforms, then you will be familiar with the sort of look and feel of Discord. It's a lot like that. It's a place to go and chat with your fellow Club Twit members, but also those of us here at Twit as well. And we're constantly working on some cool stuff by way of Aunt Pruitt to be giving you regular bits of awesome content, including recently an Ask Me Anything with Windows Weekly's own Mary Jo Foley. that is now in that Twit Plus bonus feed. If all of that sounds great, twit.tv/clubtwit to check it out. And we also had some feedback that some folks wanted to support specific shows directly. So if you are an Apple Podcasts user, then you can subscribe for $2.99 to the audio feed and get that ad-free. So you just head into Apple Podcasts, you find Tech News Weekly, you look for the audio feed, and then there's a button to tap and subscribe, and you'll get that ad-free. If you want to tweet at me, I am at Mikah Sargent, and chihuahua.coffee, CHIHUA.coffee has links to the places I'm most active online. You can check me out later today for Smart Tech Today. For the time being, I won't be on the radio show because of this mask mandate that's in place. So unfortunately, I'm not able to join Leo in the studios, but I will be back in the saddle soon for the Tech Guy on Saturdays and Tuesdays on iOS Today with Rosemary Orchard. Jason Howell, what about you?
I can be found on Twitter, really, at Jason Howell. Of course, also here on the TWiT network, doing all about Android, producing some of Leo's shows. We've had our hands full this December, getting all of the content ready for the end of year. So you've got a lot to look forward to between Christmas and New Year. We've got tons of amazing best ofs and extra content coming then. So yeah, just keep them busy here at TWiT. Big thanks to John Ashley. Big thanks to Burke. Everyone at the studio who helps us do the show each and every week. We couldn't do it without you. And we couldn't do it without you, dear listener or viewer of this show. Thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next week on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
So you got yourself the brand new latest and greatest iPhone or Samsung smartphone because you heard about all of the beautiful photography those things can create. But for some reason, you're just not quite getting it done when you try to make your photos. Or you got yourself a brand new camera because you were interested in getting started in photography, but your little new inexpensive camera still isn't quite cutting it. Well, you need to check out my show, Hands on Photography, here on TWiT. I'm going to show you how to be a better photographer and a better post-processor, and quite frankly, just help you get the most out of that new camera that's either on your phone or the brand new one that you just got for your birthday or gifts or what have you. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So head on over to twit.tv/hop. That's twit.tv/HOP and subscribe today.